Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Erudition Network. I am Eddie Phillips, and this is the Erudition Network live interactive Black History and Knowledge session for Thursday evening, June 8th. We are here, we are live, and we are somewhat, we're about 5:05 here at 5 on where we need to be. I am happy to do this show this evening. I didn't know if I was going to be able to. I was having some computer issues earlier and didn't know if, in fact, we were going to be able to provide the interactive tonight. But I'm happy that things cleared up and we were able to get on here tonight to do this. If you are new to this program, this is the Erudition Network interactive Black History and Knowledge session. We provide Black history knowledge, and we talk about other social and current things and how they align with our history. We do this, or I'm on here every Thursday. My wife is on Mondays talking about the psychological need for to live a healthy life with our Joy Living show. My sons are on Wednesdays with Erudition Generations, and they talk about issues and concerns that are assigned to their peer groups, right? The children, younger folks, their age. But on Thursday nights, we reserve this time to talk about history and to go into Black history specifically. Sean Anthony, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. I think you try to get in here first before everybody, just to let everybody know that you're here. And that's good on you. Good on you. I appreciate it. Tina's on here. I don't know what the eyes are for. I know I do think I'm a little scraggly. Maybe that's what you're talking about. But, with age, hopefully comes wisdom. So the gray is not bad. I think it looks pretty good. But tonight, we're on, and we're gonna talk about some things tonight. As I said, I had computer problems, so I wasn't able to get over my full PowerPoint that I wanted. I know PowerPoint, but I wanted to provide a little visual representation. So tonight, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to do some introduction to the topic that we're going to talk about, and we'll go from there. Teddy, yes, you're always watching. I guess that's what your mother's eyes are for. Was she saying she was watching? Don't know. No, but we're on here. Yes, that's what I was hoping. I thought you were trying to say that my gray looked beautiful. You probably were saying that too, but that's okay. If you're joining us tonight, like you see my lovely family doing, let us know. Let us know that you're with us and that you're here and ready to interact. This is an interactive broadcast. I like questions. I like people to be a little truculent if they need to be. It's fine with me. It doesn't bother me at all. But I do think that we should have a very, very open discussion and as we talk about history. So if you're on, please share, get people to join us. I'm always, like right now while I'm talking to you, I'm actually sending out another invitation for people to join us, to let them know that we're actually on live, because sometimes, people click the, however Facebook and YouTube are doing it, people click to be reminded of things. But what we're finding a lot of times is that, when people do that, the notification doesn't necessarily come up. And that's, so we try to remind folks, hey, we're on, please join us and bring your questions. So I want you to bring your questions tonight, as I go through this intro that I'm going through. So let's get started. I think we have enough of you in here tonight, different individuals who are in. And so let's just get this started. Let's just move on here. So tonight, I wanted to talk about a subject that many of you may not be quite, versed in. Good to see you, Janaris. I'm happy you were able to join us, man. Good to see you. Thank you. Please bring questions, whatever you got. One of the things that how do I segue into this? I had a conversation online with an old Navy friend of mine not too long ago, but we were talking about kids on the spectrum. His child is on the spectrum, and we were talking. He's African American or Black, and we got to talking about how children are treated, right? How they're treated by society, particularly children of color are treated by society as a whole. And as we were going through it, I me him having this conversation, I realized that there is a whole culture out here that doesn't really know the history of how our people, and I say our people, I mean people of color, how they were treated or have been treated by the systems that are out here for generations. And so as we got into that, and I was laying out to him the different issues that have happened, over time. You consider in America that 90% of our teachers are white, female. Now, that's not saying that they are not able to teach, but that does create a interesting dynamic in teaching that we have found through many studies that does not often serve people of color accurately or effectively, especially as it pertains to young Black men. We are seeing a significant amount of Black men, Black young men, being put into special education programs, being labeled with life-changing categories on their education and who they are, that stay with them and have stayed with them. And unfortunately, many of us aren't versed in knowing how to counter that narrative. And when it comes down to the idea of race, retardation, and intelligence, we have found historically that there is a problem. Good to see you, Mike. Thanks, man. Thanks for joining us. That is an issue. During the pandemic, we had a problem where people had to, their kids were home. Everybody became a homeschooled child. And a lot of parents and adults were faced with the idea of, how do I monitor and maintain my child and making sure that they can do their assignments, their ELA, their math, their science. And I'm not really versed in these things. And I don't quite understand it. And what wound up happening is children, a lot of them, because parents also have to work, started to fall behind. We are at a record level of children who are now going into higher grades who are not prepared at the elementary school levels and high school levels, who are not accurately prepared. Now, some would argue that this has always been the case. And to some extent, that is absolutely correct. But now it affects the whole. Because even the most eclectic children, right? The ones who were the elite, they have struggled. And parents are complaining, well, my child is not doing well because that 3-year gap of COVID was an intellectual trauma that this country doesn't truly fully understand yet. It doesn't truly fully understand yet. I'm going to share with you one of my screens here tonight, and I'm going to share 2 quotes to you that I pulled up that these are older quotes, but to me, they identify where we are right now. Where we are right now. You will notice that the first one, right? It says, the Ian Heckling, right? In his book, Making Up People, he states that our science has created new kinds of people that in a certain sense did not exist before. Science did this. He called it making up people. W.B. Du Bois wrote in Race Intelligence, he wrote, then came psychology. The children of public schools were studied, and it was discovered that some colored children ranked lower than white children. It was discovered, right? It was decided that people of color were inferior, that they had issues, that they were not necessarily as bright. And we're still facing these problems in our society today. And it is historic, and it is unfortunate. It is unfortunate. I was reading in a book where they were talking about a doctor who had gone and looked at the history of Black students in special education. And he was shocked at the history of it because of the categorizations that our children have been put in since the time of slavery and after. And around the year that I was born, in 1973, this doctor started to point out how destructive this was going to be. This was in 1973. And he looked at the early stages of what was going on. Because as we came out of the 60s and as we became integrated, they had to find a way, I say this as the society, to find a way to still marginalize Blacks. The best way to do it was in the schools. So what was done was an overpopulation of Black students in special education programs. People were labeled as EMR, educable mentally retarded. Not necessarily a physical retardation or physiological retardation, but something that they said was a social retardation that continued into the 1990s. And in some areas, all the way up into the early 2000s. Because we went from EMR to just labeling things as learning disabled, LD. And when that didn't work, we decided to make people emotional behavior disordered, EBD. And the disproportionate numbers of that were Black young children. These were the racially disproportional numbers that were put into the education system when teachers, predominantly white female, said that they could not deal with a aggressive black male child. And they put people in the EMR, LD, and EBD categories. And these labels, once placed on your children, stayed with your children throughout their educational career. They're untenable, they're unhandleable. We can't deal with them. Not that they had a physical issue, but this was historic. This was historic. And something that many of us still don't understand as we're coming out of this pandemic is now being used again effectively to minimalize and marginalize our children. Keith Mays wrote a book called The Unteachables. And when asked what The Unteachables was, what is an unteachable? This was the name that was given to people who they said couldn't be taught. They labeled your children as unteachable. And when you ask who is unteachable, the answer really should be no one. Anybody can be taught, but not by what the system criteria state. Ever since the time of slavery, we have labeled people as dullards, backwards, stupid, foolish, ignorant, retarded. And those things are still being used. Not the culture wars that you see with people saying, I don't like the word stupid or I don't like the word spastic. No, these are actual legal definitions that have been used to justify labeling our children and putting them in places and in situations that affect them for the rest of their lives. A 5- and 6-year-old child being told that they're unteachable. Several months ago, probably a year ago, I told everybody to go out and get this book, Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys. I told people to go and read it. It's an older book. You could get it on Amazon. You could get it on Barnes and Noble, and it will not be that expensive. But I said I wanted you to read it so that you could understand what the 4th grade failure syndrome is and how it applies historically to Black males, how it has been used as a weapon, it has been weaponized to keep our children down, to unequate the education of Black girls and Black boys, to place boys disproportionately in special education programs like EMR, EBD, or LD, and to take perfectly normal children and recommend medication, limitation, and conditioning on them. And the historical ramifications of that, based on biased psychological study, which my wife constantly tries to tell everybody about on Mondays, going and looking and contributing to these studies so that we can have an accurate identifier done by Black psychologists and professionals who are not biased racially or implicitly. But instead, what we have had is people give their children up. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm not condemning you for living your life and doing what you have to do to take care of your children. But what I am saying is not challenging, not participating, reading, investigating what these things are doing to our children. Social categorization affects your child. When you have children who are starting in school, the funniest thing to me is that by study, academically, black children, I didn't say people of color, I'm not including Latino, I'm saying particularly black children, have gone into school with the ability to say all of their ABCs, to know all of their numbers up to 100, going into kindergarten, have the ability to read to some extent, some going in reading by the first grade, kindergarten and first grade levels, they're reading at 98%. And by the end of fifth grade, we start to see a dip. By seventh grade, we have seen statistics where school children in the same classes came in reading at 97, 98, 85% and dropped down to 35, 54, 45%. Because they were told that they can't be taught. Their behavior problems are too dire. They don't listen. And what is not supported is, why is the kid not listening? Why are they unattentive? Why is this happening? And why does it seem to keep happening with young black men? A bunch of historical liars, William Archibald Dunning and different others, they lied. And their lies continue to fester. The Moynihan Report, they lied and told you all that the reason that the young black boys don't learn is because they don't have fathers in the home. But that completely doesn't answer how they came into classes reading at 80 and 90% levels and then dropped by the time they got through fourth grade. There's many theories that black psychologists have shared, like the fact that in kindergarten and through the first early grades, boys are allowed to be more interactive. The kids sing, they jump around, they make crafts, they talk to each other. And by the time they get to third or fourth grade, they're being told to sit in a chair, read a book, do a paper, and it's not as interactive. Studies have shown that many boys, not all, but many boys need interactive education. They need to be doing something as they learn. That's why the coach in sports tends to be able to reach these problematic children in a way that the teachers in the classroom who spends more time with them every day cannot. And the application is never questioned. We just assume, well, he's a great basketball player. He's a great football player. He's a great baseball player. And we never consider the fact that that child has found a way to interact, to be physically active and learn something that he or she sees as something that could make them seen, recognized, and not in a bad way. not seen as a educable, mentally retarded child, not seen as a child with a learning disability, not seen as a child with an emotional behavior problem, but just as a successful child that's doing something that everybody recognizes and applauds them for. And as we get more Black psychologists and psychiatrists and professionals to get involved in this, and education specialists to get involved who understand what this means, who get it, we become better people, a better community. Everybody complains about the numerous children who ran out in Chicago a couple of weeks ago and started destroying downtown. Everybody complains about the predilection of pulling out guns and acting violently. But many of us don't question what's going on when we put our children in schools from kindergarten to 12th grade, and we basically say, you got them for 8 hours, we'll see them when they get home. And then we don't question what they're being taught, how they're being treated. Malcolm X once said, people will know by your actions when you don't like them. James Baldwin sat with a professor and once told him, it's not the fact that you call yourself racist. I can't say that it's racist, but I look at what is going on. I look at the examples of what is happening in the percentages of our education system that keeps marginalizing disproportionately Black young men. A system that tells them that they're unteachable. We got to do better. I get on this program, my wife gets on her program. We're talking to you so that you understand the struggle. Understand the struggle. Good to see you, Tony. Glad you're here. Glad you could join us. Our children are not imbeciles. They're not dullards. But when you look at what is going on, when you look at the history of it, when you look at the history of education in this country, the separate but equal, the giving our children old books back in the 40s and the 50s and before. Then when we became integrated, the idea of labeling them with these labels. And I'm going to keep pushing these labels because I want you to hear them. So when you hear them, when they talk about children, you know what they're saying, not just the acronym. The educable mentally retarded, EMR, that supposedly has gone away, and now we label that as learning disabled or EBD. Now you can say whatever you want to call it, ADD, or whatever, but however you put it, these are the charts that they put our children at. These are the charts that since the early 50s that they labeled as unteachable. Medical doctors, psychologists, social workers, school administrators, teachers, even parents, allowing this legislation to go past so that government, state policyholders can go in and label our children. And when you think about the unteachable, when you think about the EBD, the emotionally behavioral disordered, right? We often go and look at the ghetto, the inner city, the students who, they live in poverty. They don't know any better. They come from broken families. There's no father. There's no mother. We blame it on and place it on the altar of social disorder. But we don't look at it in reality. That from the same places that you say these EBD children come from, geniuses come from. So if that be the case, if it's only because of the environment, but they all share an environment, how is that logical? How is that logical? The other issue that we must face also is children with disability. Children who may have physical disabilities, slight mental disabilities, but they're not unteachable. But teachers deem them to be unteachable. They come up with the categories in order to label your child, and that label stays with them throughout their academic career. And so when you drop your child off at school and you say, well, my kid, he was reading, he was doing well, he seemed to be okay. But now he's in your class and you're telling me he doesn't do his work, and I see him at home, he's doing his work. And then your kid starts to see education as a challenge, as a job, as a chore, as a task. No longer am I picking up a book to enjoy it. I'm picking up a book because I'm being belligerently pushed by pernicious people, ignorant, horrible people, to see it this way as something painful. And it affects how they will learn for the rest of their lives. In my PowerPoint, I added this quote, right? This is from 1912. This is from a magazine, a psychology magazine. And it was said, it was decided to exclude from Detroit public schools all children in the idiot group and also those in the middle and lower grade imbecile groups. This rule has been rigidly adhered to, as it is considered a waste of public funds to attempt to teach children of these classes, who are regarded by all specialists as unteachable. We don't want to use funds, and we don't want to take the time to teach them. We don't care. Let them die on the vine. That was 1912. This other quote was 1967, where a famed anthropologist wrote, "For the ghetto school is marked not only by the obvious segregation of class and ethnic groups, but also by the formal official segregation within each grade by ability, and further by an informal segregation within each according to behavior. Thus, many slum schools are divided into classes as they are defined as teachable and then those who are non-teachable." And when you establish order in education in this way, then you find yourself in schools understanding why teachers demoralize your child. And we forget historically why. When Brown versus the Board of Education happened in 1954, white educators, psychologists, that's when they started to develop special education, not to help disabled children, but they did it because they wanted to protect the interests of white normal students who they wrote in their books as being the future of the white race, the future torchbearers of our civilization, was what one actually wrote. The torchbearers, the people who would go forth after us to maintain white supremacy. We can't beat them in the law, but what we can do is demoralize them. What we can do is make them feel like they're nothing. What we can do is establish new criteria. This is what happened, ladies and gentlemen. This is why I wanted to go into this lesson tonight. It is important that we understand these things and that we understand what they're talking about when they label our children as normal and subnormal, unteachable. And this is just the introduction. I want to spend time on this in the next few weeks because I think we have to. As our children are out here for the summer, I have seen Black teachers with a 40% IEP students get compared to white students with 2% IEP students. Come on now. If we do not understand education, I used to be taught by my mama, starts in the home. It starts in the home. And a lot of us don't understand that because a lot of us have been taught that we just take our kids to school and we let them worry about it. It was my mama that taught me to read. It was my mama that taught me my ABCs. It was my mama that taught me my numbers. Before I ever walked into a brick and mortar school, before I ever sat before somebody, my mama made sure I understood that so that I could communicate effectively. And we need to be doing that in our homes, in our schools. We need to understand the importance of that again. Because if we don't understand that importance, if we don't get it, we're going to find ourselves back in the same position over and over again. We're going to be mad at the children out here who we say aren't acting right. We're going to be ticked off by the behaviors that we're seeing in society that don't have to be our normal. But we're allowing it to be our normal. Teddy said there's no substitute for pairing. This is absolutely correct. If you're just joining us, what I'm talking about tonight is the historic ramifications of where we are. There was I'm trying to go through my PowerPoint as I'm talking to y'all because I didn't get a chance to bring it up. But I was looking at one of my things, after Brown versus Board of Education, people don't really understand. They think we just went through civil rights. They think, no, things changed. When they realized they couldn't keep us from going into schools, when they couldn't stop the second waves and third waves, they came up with a different way of taking care of business. They put people in these compulsory educational situations where they told you your child was inferior. They used doctors and psychologists to tell you that your kids were inferior. They told you that the middle class student was more intelligent and that the schools that was down the street in the ghetto, they were at risk. They weren't right. Those kids, they can't learn. And if you go and you look at books and essays and studies and that have been published from that time, from Brown versus Board of Education, all the way up until the 2000s, to 2020, you will see in a lot of those studies and a lot of the publications, they're still using the same words. High grade defective. Right? I didn't call him stupid. He's disadvantaged, educationally disadvantaged, because he was at risk. And no one is looking at what these code words really are saying is they're unteachable. We can't do anything with them. What we're doing is we're forgetting that special education began for a reason. Because what it really was designed to do was to protect the young white people from a dominant change in culture. And it made everybody else abnormal as long as you weren't white, upper or middle class. And it took away your ability to get an equal education because you were at risk. And it had nothing to do with physical disability or actual mental retardation based on a physical thing that may have happened, like Down syndrome or something like that. This was entirely done as a cultural shift. And it can also be argued that even those whites who were considered to be Down syndrome children or have other mental deficiencies, even if it was a physiological deficiency, they were given better treatment than the kids who were in the ghetto, who were the slow learners or the ones who were uneducable. And yet we don't look at how those systems were put in place. And so when we tell people that my child is learning disabled, right? They have a learning disability. Well, in what situation here? Is the LD based on physiological retardation, or is it EBD? Is this a behavioral thing? And then who categorizes the behavioral disorder? Who did you get to validate that my child, who has never shown these issues at home, who was reading at a 90% percentile before he went into your school, how all of a sudden did he become EMR, LD, or EBD? When you bifurcate the educational system, when you separate it, what are you separating it based on? And then we wonder why our children, when they're out of school during the summer months, are cutting loose. And we say to ourselves, man, these kids don't know how to act. But we don't know what they've been taught for the months and months and months. Every day. Conditioned, told. Educators have to study to be educators. And to show you how disingenuous this is, if my child has a learning disability, meaning my child has been labeled as someone who is disabled, Why do they not get ADA protection? Why is it that the federal government isn't providing money and things to take care of my child's disability so that I may be able to teach them at the level of their understanding? Because it's a lie. Because I allowed my child to be labeled with this, to carry this weight from the age of 6 all the way on, without a physical handicap or disability. The school psychologist simply said, your child is unteachable. But when you go back and you read books from education geniuses and folks who these educators learn from, you start to realize this is garbage. This is garbage. Go pick up the study by Robert L. Osgood, right? It's called For Children Who Vary from Normal Type, Special Education in Boston, from the end of the 1800s to the early 1900s. Go read Jason Ellis's book, and I'm going to put these books in our chat. A Class by Themselves. That's a 2019 book. This stuff ain't new, ladies and gentlemen. We have to understand what they're doing to us and what they continue to do to us. And you may say to yourself, Eddie, why does that matter? Why does that matter? Well, if you think about this, I want you to consider the states who have no problem in executing black men, putting them to death, even when they have been found to be, by their own system, to be LD, to be pushed into a criminal mentality, but they still put them to death. Go look up the history of Texas. Go look at what's going on in Alabama, in Georgia, and how they use the education to justify the execution. Gary Dodson, yes, it has long been the great unequalizer. Good to see you, brother. That is absolutely true. And we got to do better. It's not, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not telling you that the educator is the only one who's on the edge for this. We are too. Education starts at home. What books are your children invested in, engaging in? What authors are they reading? What math are you investigating together? Simple science in your home. Black men used to be able to go out there with their daddy and at least know the mechanics of a car, of a lawnmower. How do you make a basic radio receiver? Survival techniques that they learned from their father, who learned from their father, their granddaddy, even if the father wasn't in the house. We got to do better. Dr. Dawson, I am 100% in favor of capital punishment, but no one can deny the disparities and executions are the conundrum that must be addressed, especially when they're done under the guise of a system that has developed the criminal. Because one thing you will know is that people will learn something. God made us to be learning creations. We learn, categorize, figure out. If I'm not learning how to be an engineer in school, well, maybe I'm out here learning how to go and deal drugs on this street. Maybe I'm learning how to rise through the gang system out here. The only difference between the corporate and the gang is that when the gang gets tired of me, they're going to put a bullet in me. Or maybe I'm going to go to jail and be retired in jail. Whereas if I was a corporate and I was working in the corporation, I work my way up. They could fire me. They could let me go. Right? This is people are learning how to survive. But learning how to survive has to start at home. If you know I tell people the story of my mother, and I will tell it again. When I was a young boy going out of kindergarten into first grade, I had a teacher. Her name was Miss Tandy. And Miss Tandy was a racist white woman. And ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. Your children know when they're dealing with a racist. They know when they're dealing with a bigot. They know because it's not normal. It's not normal in the way that they look at how children are creatures of learning. They watch how people act, what they say, what they do. If you're in a store, your child grabs you a little bit tighter and they move away from somebody, they saw something that maybe you didn't see. And your older bias going through my day mentality, they saw it. Something ain't right. Kids pick it up. But I digress. I saw that Miss Tandy was not right. I never wanted to interact with her, but she was my teacher. So she told my mother that I could read. Now, as I told you earlier at the beginning of this hour, my mother taught me to read herself. And my mother sat there with Miss Tandy going off. I never forgot this. And my mother was sitting there and the woman's like, well, he don't read. He don't know how to read. So we're going to have to hold him back. And, you know, he's at an age where it's not going to bother him too much if he gets held back. Right. And my mother's like, this boy reads all the time. So she looked at me. She grabbed her purse strap and she said, he picked that book up and read to her. I looked at my mother. I wasn't trying to get hit with that purse strap. And I read. And that woman was like, well, he doesn't do that with me. Ladies and gentlemen, if you know your child, if you teach your child, and that's the key, knowing and teaching, before they go into these schools, before they go into these programs where they lose themselves with the interactions that we love so much to talk about. We love to talk about how I want to put my kid in a school because I want them to be able to interact with the kids that are around them. And we forget that a lot of the kids that are around them may not be the kids they should be interacting with. But what we wind up doing is, because we're not engaging with our children, we lose them to the system. We lose them to these categories that have been pushed upon us. I promise you, we're going to talk about this. I want to do this for the next 2 weeks. Tonight is just an introduction. It's just an introduction. Right? And it's because I really want us to have the visuals. I want to present you with the evidence that you can physically see. Not just me talking to you tonight. We got to understand the difference between the code words that are out here. He's black intelligent. He has black behaviors. Right? These little code words, these little things that are put out here for our children. People, like Malcolm said, people know when you don't like them. Like James Baldwin said, the evidence is obvious. The evidence shows you. It don't matter what you tell me. I'm looking at the evidence of what you are presenting to me. I showed you earlier those two clips right there where W.B. Du Bois said, then came psychology. And the children of public schools were studied. And then they told us that we were inferior. They made up people. They told us that these people were legit. And that this was what had to happen. And then they pushed them into a compulsory education system where we found that many people were not retarded. Those people who you talk to that came after the 50s, after Brown versus the Board of Education, who will tell you, right? Yeah, I was labeled most of my life as that, as this. But I overcame it because I had a church, I had a mentor, I had a grandfather, I had a father, I had a mother, I had someone who told me that that's not true. That's bull. That is why I'm telling you tonight, the intro to this, it starts with us, the parents. It starts with us, the mentors. We empower the next generation. We give them the ableism that they need to say, you will not place me in a category based on your own perception or biased or implicit biased perception. I am more than that. If we can get to that level in our community, in our churches, in our families, we can try to get past all this LD labeling. And those who really do have physiological issues can be treated. But don't label everybody as an emotional behavior disorder child because you can't reach them. And then go, well, but coach such and such, he reached them. Now he's an NBA player. He's an NFL player. He reached them because he spent time with him. He reached him because he met him at his level of learning. He reached him because he gave him something to believe in himself or herself. But the teacher that's sitting there with him day in, day out, that's saying, that kid, he ain't going to make it. I'm going to close tonight. We're reaching our hour. I'm going to close tonight with another story. I had a teacher when I was in high school, and I was hanging around with some friends of mine, and a white teacher came down the hallway, and we were all, roughhousing and laughing. And he said, you know what? That's why some of y'all, you either going to be dead or in jail. And we were like, wow, what was that about? This was a social studies teacher at a predominantly black school right across the street from Cabrini Green, who went to work every day with the assumption that these kids were no good and not worth my time to teach. We had teachers who would actually just sit there in a classroom and not teach. I got F's in United States world history. And if you know me, that's crazy. Because I had a teacher who would not teach. And I got tired of sitting in the class every day with people acting fools and doing whatever. It was a waste of my time. He passed those people who just sat in his class and failed the ones who didn't go. So I wound up taking the classes in summer school. And those were the two teachers I had in summer school at a different school were two of the best teachers I ever had in history. because they were engaged. We got to do better. We got to do better. Your knowledge that you pass on to your children is fundamentally needed. It is needed. I hope you got something tonight. I apologize for not having the slides ready that I would, but I promise you we will have them next week. But I wanted to talk about this. I wanted to get into this subject. I wanted us to really get into this because I feel like it is something that falls under our attention in the society, and it is historic. If you didn't learn anything tonight but the fact of the labeling, if you didn't learn anything tonight but these old labels and how these old labels are still attaching to our children, if you didn't get anything tonight but the fact that learning disability in this country has been labeled in different ways and they mean different things, I feel you learned something. If you can see the difference between what was said in 1912 to what is being said in 2020, 2023, then I think you got something. The educable, mentally retarded that we got away from, supposedly, but we relabeled it the learning disabled. And then we added another part of that, the emotional behavioral disordered. Those are the ones you see running around the street. Those are the ones nobody can teach. Next week, we're going to kind of go into some charts. We're going to kind of see how all that plays out. And we're going to put some historical lines in there, right? Or how we got from this ideal of the dullard, the backward, the educated, educationally challenged, the deprived, the at risk, all of these different terms that have been now added into our lexicon, right? And the definitions of things that we all joke about. Well, I'm ADD. We'll talk about that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate everybody's comments tonight, man. I appreciate all of you all coming in here. Please share, like, subscribe, get people to start watching the network. I promise you they will get something from it. We try very hard to provide you with knowledge. I'm going to drop some of those books and things into the chat because I really want you all to start reading and getting in touch with some of these things. I'm put in Robert Osgood's book. I'm going to put in Jason Ellis's book and some others. So you will see that in our chats. I'll put them on YouTube and I'll put them in Facebook. I want you to read. I want you to read. I want you to read. I want you to grow. But until next Thursday, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your time. I hope. Oh, I'm sorry. I missed some comments. Sorry. I wasn't blowing you all off. Let me see. That's how I felt about Spanish 2 and 3 instructor. Only gave worksheets, never taught. Never taught the language. It's just a curriculum to go through, right? Janera said, been there. Yes, well, I think we all have. Mike, I appreciate it. Just wanted to. This is intro. This is just intro. Wanted to give you the structure. Okay, we're gonna get into some more of the fleshing out and muscle come next week. And needed. It is more important now than it ever has been to do what we need to protect our children at every level. At every level. I appreciate my wife because she makes sure and helps. We have that love for our children to push our children to do what they need to do, even though sometimes they may not want to. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you. You all have a great rest of your week, and we will see you next Thursday as we do the program. Tina will be on Monday, so please Go out there and click the bell on the Erudition Network, and you will see Tina will be on Monday. She comes on to do her Adroit Living show, talking about how to live and give you a psychological basis on how to live a better life. And the boys will be doing their Erudition Generation show, where they talk about things that are interesting to their peer groups. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, this is me. This is Eddie signing out of here. You all have a really good rest of your day, a good evening, and a good weekend. Thank you. Bye.